Hi, this is Colin Sandberg from the Endurance Collective, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about using in Zwift to help you with your endurance and recovery rides. Um, First of all, what I want to say is that for me, um, I look at Zwift as a training tool, not a goal. Now, there's an important distinction between this. A bit between seeing it as a means to an end versus an end itself. Basically, my goal is not to win Zwift. It's not even really to win races in Zwift. Now, sometimes there might be an overlap there, but primarily I am a road and gravel racer. Most of the people I coach, primarily road, gravel, track, mountain bike racers, and maybe some competitive recreational riders. The distinction here is just how two people might look at, like, if you do a training race. For one person, that could be their peak event. For somebody else, it could just be, they're doing it purely for the training effect. Like I said, there might be some overlap there. They might still be doing it to win the race, but the primary goal is for training. And so, for me, and the angle I'm going to be coming at this video through is using Zwift as a training tool. So I want to make that distinction first. So let's talk about Pace Partners. Pace Partners is this feature that Zwift introduced in, I believe, October of last year. And what they are is they are pacer bots. They are sort of like most competitive distance runs will have the, especially half marathons and marathons. You'll see people running around, running at a certain pace, holding up a sign. You'll see a whole bunch of people around them. It's the same thing in Zwift. These are bots that are fixed at a certain power, and they are fixed at a certain weight. So they're by nature a certain power to weight ratio. As of today, there are 4 different ones. There is diesel, which is 1 to 2.4 watts per kilo. C, cadence at 2.5 to 3.1 watts per kilo. B, brevet at 3.3 to 3.9 watts per kilo. And A, Anquetil, named after the famous French cyclist Jacques Anquetil, at 4+ watts per kilo. They are also listed at different weights. I believe A and C weigh 65 kilograms, and B and D are 82 kilograms. So there's a little bit different from a group ride that you might do on Zwift that would be advertised at a certain power to weight ratio range. But at the end of the day, they're real people. And a lot of times end up being harder than advertised, and you end up going harder than you might want to, especially if the goal is to do endurance or recovery, like I'm going to be focusing on for this video. Now, you'll normally see, if you jump onto these, a bunch of people riding around the pacer bots. So it's not just like you and that one pacer bot for the most part. It's a whole group of people. It could be 100 around them. So some advantages, really quick, to using this. Number one, you're going to go faster. You're riding with a group. You're going to go faster. That means you're going to accumulate XP, experience points, on Zwift faster. That means you can level up faster. It means you can purchase new bikes, new wheels faster. And just as an example, I did a couple days ago, I joined the B group, the Brevet Pacer Bot. I was riding around. It was the Sand and Sequoias course, and we covered 27 miles in an hour. So pretty fast, a lot faster than I do on my own, especially this was an endurance ride. I was able to keep my heart rate in endurance that whole time. 2, you're going to accumulate drops faster. Drops are sort of the virtual currency in Zwift that you purchase. Now, you need to have a certain level to be able to buy certain things for them to be unlocked, but you also need the currency to buy it. When you ride close to the pacer bots, you will get a multiplier, which goes up. It starts at 1.0 for the drops, then up to 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, and 2.0. You do have to be pretty close. I believe it's a 10 or 12 meter range of them. And if it's a large group, that can be pretty difficult to do. It can require a lot of concentration. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But 3, advantage to it, you can practice drafting and riding for efficiency. This is something that is an important skill on Zwift, especially if you're doing races or regular group rides. And it's different from in the real world. The real world, you feel that draft. You learn how to do it. And you know, if you're riding 30 miles an hour in somebody's draft and you come out into the wind, you sure as hell feel that. You don't feel it on Zwift, so you have to rely on these visual cues, a bunch of numbers. This is good experience, I think, to help you learn how to do that. There's also this thing that a lot of experienced Zwift racers will talk about, how they can be in somebody's draft and there's a range of power that they can put out this to stay right behind them in that draft. And if you're riding for efficiency, you really want to go to the low end of that draft, you know, because if you can stay in the same position and put out 10, 20 watts less, staying right on that person's wheel, then you want to do it. That'll save you energy. There's also the idea that if you want to move up, you have to sort of put in a little bit of a surge and leapfrog that person, go outside that range, sort of pop that bubble. That's a skill. You can practice all of that with these pacer bots before you go into a real race or anything. So let's back up a second and talk about endurance rides. This is one of these things that anybody who I work with as a coast athlete knows. I have a thing about this. Endurance rides are deceptively simple, and a lot of people think of endurance rides as just go ride. And I think they're a lot more complicated than that. And if there's one most important workout to really learn how to do, it's an endurance ride. So the most important rule of endurance rides is keep your heart rate down. Keep it in zone 2. Keep your heart rate below 84% of your functional threshold heart rate, which your functional threshold heart rate would be if you did a 40K or 1 hour time trial, what heart rate would you average? Okay. So if you were doing an endurance ride with a pace partner, you'd want to choose the one that allows you to do that, that allows you to keep your heart rate in zone 2. But because of drafting and because of the advantage you're going to get with a group, you should be able to choose one that's a little bit above the power that you would put out. The pacer bot's power is going to be above yours because you can use that group to your advantage. So it's worth noting that there's a lot of other possibilities for these pacer bots. Some people might want to use them for intervals and do things like try to stay off the front, put in an attack and stay off the front of that pack or stop that pacer bot from catching you for as long as you can. Or you might want to drop off the back and then try to chase the pacer bot in group. That's great. I think those are great possibilities, but for this video, I'm really just talking about endurance and recovery rides, how to use them best. So anyway, prescribing endurance rides, second most important rule is keep pedaling. Avoid coasting time as much as possible. Obviously, if you're riding on the road, you're going to have stoplights and stop signs and technical descents. Sometimes you're going to have to coast a little bit, but you want to minimize that. Shouldn't be a big deal indoors, whether you're using a pacer bot or not. You're probably not coasting too much. You do have some times where you're on a certain course on Zwift and you can get into a super tuck, but that's going to be pretty minimal. Next rule is I like to see power output stay relatively steady. I don't really care if it's at the low end or the high end of your endurance power zone, or even, a lot of times the average power is going to be in recovery power zone. That's fine. The most important thing is the heart rate, but I do like to see a relatively steady power. I don't want to see fading throughout the ride. Or a lot of big surges in that ride. And at the same time, I do think some variation is good. Variation in your cadence and variation in power. Back 10 years ago, when I didn't have a smart trainer, I was riding on a dumb trainer, and occasionally I'd do a 3-hour endurance ride indoors. It would look at that file afterwards, it's just totally flat. 200 watts for 3 hours at 90 RPM. And that's great in some ways, but you don't want to get too specific. You ride all day at 200 watts at 90 RPM, you're really good at riding at 200 watts at 90 RPM. It's good to have a range of cadence where you're more comfortable, especially if you're doing mass start races. It's not quite as necessary for if you're a time trialist or a triathlete who, you can pretty much just lock it in where you need it to be. But most events will require you to be able to produce power at a range of cadences. So it's good to train that. And most events are not just steady state, just locked in a certain power for a long time. So it's good to have a range that you practice in. It's a bit more realistic. Again, these pacer bots are useful for this because you will have to make some, you're falling too far back, you have to make a little bit of a surge to catch back up to the pack. You're getting too far ahead, you have to let up a little bit. So you have that range, which is a bit more realistic of what you would have in the real world. Okay, so some advantages, how to use these pacer bots to accomplish these endurance and recovery rides correctly. But I do want to mention a couple of downsides to it, a couple of potential downsides. First of all, they are riding the same courses over and over again. So that can be pretty boring. I think there's something to be said for exploring new courses on Zwift, and you'll get that in a lot of these group rides that where you won't get it necessarily riding with pacer bots. Now, hopefully this feature is going to expand. We've only had it for a few months now. Hopefully they're going to start doing it in other worlds and in other courses. That'll be great. We look forward to that. Second potential disadvantage is that having to pay attention to the group around you can be really good in some ways. It can help you develop awareness, some other valuable skills that I talked about, but it does require some concentration. And that's really up to you how much concentration you want to have when you're doing an indoor endurance ride. If you're like me, I think a little bit is good, but I also like to tune out a little bit. That's just me. I like to, watch a movie or listen to a podcast or listen to an audio book. And so it's just sort of striking that balance there. Lastly, the last potential downside that I wanted to say is that these guys don't stop. They are bots. They will just go on and on at a given power for forever. So there might be the temptation just for you to keep going, even though you're going to have times, especially for a longer ride, you're going to need to get off the bike, stretch, use the restroom, fill your bottles, grab something to eat, whatever. Now, I do think you can just hop off the bike, and then when you're ready to get back on, you can either shut down Zwift, boot it back up again, or you can ride backwards on the course and just wait for them to come around again, pull a U-turn, and get right back in with the group, whatever you want. But there's that temptation that you're just not going to take a break when you need it. So in review, here's what I'm suggesting. You boot up Zwift, click on Watopia. Right now, they are only in Watopia. I will share a little video with you here. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, so on Watopia, you click on the pace partner you want to click on, and so I don't have this in the video. Okay, I'm going to pause this for 1 second, but click on the one. It's higher than your actual normal power, but the one that's appropriate, it's going to allow you to stay in zone 2 heart rate without going over. It might take a little bit of experimentation, and of course, if you're doing a recovery ride, you want to choose the pacer bot that's going to allow you to stay in recovery heart rate. Or you know, what's that? 67% of your threshold heart rate for a recovery ride, 84% for an endurance ride. May take a little bit of experimentation, but you know, just to give you an example, you know, for me, I typically average between 2.5 and 3.2 watts per kilo on an endurance ride, and then 1.6 to 2.3 watts per kilo for a recovery ride. Those, that would, you look at those numbers initially and you'd think, okay, I should do the D ride for recovery and the C ride for endurance, but actually I can bump it up a bit. So ride the C ride for recovery and the B ride for endurance because I'm drafting and using the group dynamics there. But you gotta experiment with it, see what works best for you. Okay, I'll start this video again. Okay, so here is jumped in B. You get a few seconds, excuse me, of pedal assist. That green bot is the pacer bot there. That's B brevet, and I ride off the front a little bit, so I'm just sort of soft pedaling here, going nice and easy, and then just ride in that pack. And you'll see here it's a relatively large pack and growing. Now, as I said, the longer you stay very close to that pacer bot, that multiplier, which is now 1.0 and will go up, will increase. But for me, I feel like that requires a lot of concentration. So just not quite worth it for me if it's a large pack, because it doesn't allow me to tune out very much, which I just want to do a little bit. But you might want to do that, especially if you really need to increase your drops there. And then I'm going to ride with them as long as I feel like, or as long as I need to for the ride. If I need to get off the bike, I'll just hop off the bike and fill my bottles, use the bathroom, then pull a U-turn, and then pull another U-turn when I see them come around the course again. All right, pause that. Okay. All right. So that's it. Let me know if you have any questions. Write in the comments, or if this was too confusing, maybe I can explain it in a simpler way. But I like to be as thorough as possible. Hope you got something out of it.